Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
And a good Monday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 10th of February. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with the very latest watches, warnings, and advisories, as well as current weather conditions in your area and also the forecast by going to www.weather.gov/Alaska. And you can also find the same information by going to arh.noaa.gov. That's the website we've been using for years. Now, if you just go to weather.gov/Alaska, it'll get you there just a little bit faster, and that's a lot easier to remember. The weather info line is open at 800-472-0391. Find each Weather Service office on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. During the afternoon, you can get a quick update on YouTube from the NWS Anchorage account. And after the show, of course, you'll get the full broadcast of what you're seeing right now on alaskapublic.org. You can also search for that on YouTube by using the channel AKWX-TV. Here's a look at the hazardous weather situation now. We'll start off in Southeast. Got a lot of things going on there. First of all, we're talking about snow across some of these southern inner channels. A winter weather advisory will continue until 9 o'clock tonight. It has the potential of being extended, but we'll keep an eye on that. Looks like another couple inches of snow possible in that region through the evening hours there, but surrounding that from Hyder all the way up to Craig, Klawock, back down around through Petersburg, and across the outer coastlines there of southern parts of Southeast. A winter storm watch will go into effect tomorrow afternoon through Wednesday, and varying amounts of snow in different spots there. For instance, Prince of Wales Island, you could see as much as 6 inches of snow. Kupreanof, anywhere from 4 to 7 inches of snow. And up around Hyder, you could be looking at about 10 inches of snow. So again, it's a watch. It simply means conditions are setting up to be favorable for that much snow to fall in the region, but things aren't really a lock just yet. We'll keep watching it, and if it does look like those amounts are possible, you'll see that become a winter storm warning. If not, or maybe lesser amounts of snow are possible, you might see a winter weather advisory, and if it completely falls apart, well, we'll just drop the watch. Looking a little bit farther north, you can see areas up around Juneau under a high wind warning. That will continue at least until 9 o'clock again, with some gusty winds possible in the order of 60 to 70 miles per hour. We've seen some of those stronger winds earlier today, so look for those gusts to continue throughout the rest of the afternoon and evening hours. And way up north here, around the Thai Inlet and Klondike Highway areas, you're looking at a wind chill advisory. Wind chill values there could be pretty cold, anywhere from 30 to 35 below. And that may last until at least Tuesday morning, maybe Tuesday afternoon, depending on how strong the winds stick around. So watch for that. And if you're driving in that general area, you want to make sure that if you are outside, you're using extra precautions if you have to step outside of your car for any length of time. Now looking over in South Central, the Matanuska Valley still under a red flag warning. And again, we were talking about this last week. It's due to the lack of snow cover. That's the first part. But the second part, of course, is the persistent winds. They're not as strong as what we were dealing with on Friday, but the gusts and the breezes that are still coming out of the valley are still relatively strong at times. And with that, and the low humidity and the lack of snow cover, the fire danger is there, and the potential for rapid growth and spread is upon the Matanuska Valley. So a red flag warning continues, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. That's usually a daily event, or at least a daily time frame there. So once those conditions improve, snowfall included, if that were to happen, the red flag warning would likely be rescinded. Here's a look at what else is going on across the region. Fire danger there. We're talking about the Matanuska Valley, but as far as any other places go, the western Kenai Peninsula right now not really looking at any more ongoing issues. So the red flag warning there has not been extended for your area at this time. Looking out across the west and the satellite view there across the Bering Sea, you'll notice still a pretty decent southerly flow coming up the western parts of the Kamchatka Peninsula, working all the way up the Gulf of Anadyr, working all the way around the ridge of high pressure that's still sitting in the upper atmosphere here. We've got a pretty persistent trough of low pressure still dropping across the North Pacific, and as a result of that, it's guiding most of the active weather well to the south. I have to apologize, the satellite loop is not really looping very well tonight, so again, we're just kind of coaxing this along here. But out across the west, what you don't see under the satellite picture is a considerable amount of low clouds across the region. If we're looking at this with a visible view, we would have a pretty decent low deck sitting right across the central and southern parts of the Bering Sea. Those low clouds, again, adding areas of fog under that ridge of high pressure, but really the most active weather is going to drop down. You'll notice some brighter white clouds here across the Chukchi Seacoast. It's a little bit easier to see here on the Alaska view. This is the next disturbance, and this is colder air dropping down across the west coast, and as it does so, it may encourage a little bit more storm development here and enhancement of low pressure sitting across the Gulf. In the meantime, we already have a low sitting here across southern parts of southeast and just south of Haida Gwaii. If you look very carefully here, the comma-shaped cloud structure. Watch what happens here as we put this into motion. Okay, this one's going to do it too. We're going to just kind of creep along here with the satellite picture. This is working right up through the Haida Gwaii area in British Columbia, and as this is spinning northward, we've got a frontal boundary sitting just north of Ketchikan and right around Petersburg. As this is working northward, this is what's encouraging that snow growth around the southern inner channels. Now we're starting back over here. Here's our low. We've got a lot of cold and dry air here, and still a relatively clear and dry up across the northern parts of southeast. So this is kind of the zone where all the active weather is happening. We're going to see if we can really build that up though as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday. And if that's the case, then again, conditions may be favorable for some heavy, wet, accumulating snow across some of the places we were talking about earlier, like Klawock and Craig and Petersburg, even Hyder, again, looking at the potential of 10 inches of snow. Meanwhile, across southern parts of Alaska, all the way out to southwest, it's mainly just clear and dry and cold. The winds are still continuing, and with that little bit of a breeze and temperatures only in the teens and 20s in most cases, it has not been a very active weather period for precipitation mostly. You might even be surprised to know that Atka was one of the warmest spots in the state today. You might be surprised to know that it was only 37 degrees in Atka. So it's pretty interesting. The cold has returned to a large part of Alaska, even in southeast. Low pressure sitting south of Kodiak right now at 988 millibars. We've got high pressure sitting across the Alcan border, mainly inside the Yukon at 1,040 millibars. And once again, there's our disturbance up across the Chukchi Seacoast. That's going to drop southward as we head into tonight, bringing the risk of some light snow accumulation across the Brooks Range and the northeastern coastal plain. Areas of blowing snow along that frontal boundary. Snow showers more likely in places like Nome and the Seward Peninsula. And we've got our friend low pressure system there across the Gulf of Alaska. That's going to stay put and really focus on the southern areas of the Gulf while we get a warmer surge of air trying to work its way northward into southeast, with high pressure also creating a little bit of a stronger wind gradient across central and northern parts of the Panhandle. Trough of low pressure swinging across south central, and you can see we've got a nice gradient of high to low pressure here all the way across the Alaska Peninsula and the central and eastern Aleutians. So the winds are going to stay up there as well. As we go into Tuesday, low pressure still sitting just to the west of Haida Gwaii, 984 millibars there. Snow starting to work its way northward, thus that winter storm watch. Colder air is dropping southward, still looking pretty dry across southeast, or south central I should say, Prince William Sound and the Alaska Peninsula. Snow showers there, and as we get into Wednesday, low pressure is moving a little bit closer to the Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound. Still doesn't look like a huge threat of snow for anywhere along the Cook Inlet, but we're going to watch and see what happens on Thursday night, and into Friday. There's an opportunity for some snow to develop there, but it is so critical on the track and movement of this low pressure system that we're not very confident about the amount of snow that's possible just yet. So we're going to keep close watch on that for south central. For southeast, it looks like snow is moving into your area. For areas around the southern parts of southeast especially, accumulating snow will continue. And again, the winter storm watch will be in effect at that point. We'll see again if that turns over to a warning or an advisory. Out to the west, colder air is dropping across the west coast. Looks like you've got more of a northeasterly breeze still blowing off the continent, so this is going to be a drier wind for you and doesn't look like a huge threat for snow, but snow showers kind of in scattered fashion and relatively light across the Aleutians will still be possible as we go through Wednesday. Here's a look at current temperatures then, or as of 4 o'clock anyway. Temps only in the 20s to low 30s across southeast. Just not a warm day at all. 12 around Haines there, 32 around Middleton Island, and around Valdez it was 19 degrees this afternoon. Lower 20s for south central, 12 in Talkeetna, 8 below in Fairbanks. Northway and Eagle both approaching the 30-degree mark. 29 below in Fort Yukon, 24 below in Arctic Village, and temperatures in the single digits, but still sub-zero there around Anaktuvuk Pass. anywhere from 5 to 10 below across the Arctic coast, mainly east of Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. Once you got up to Barrow, it was 5 above. The Chukchi Sea coast around Wainwright and south in the low to mid-teens. Kotzebue Sound, single digits and low 20s there as you got out a little bit closer toward Kotzebue. 17 above in Nome, 21 above in St. Lawrence Island. Around McGrath, it was 6 above. Bethel showing 6 degrees above zero, 7 in Grayling. And out around Southwest in Bristol Bay, temperatures were hovering again in the low to mid-teens. The Alaska Peninsula, 20s and 30s there, upper 20s for the Pribilof Islands, and low to mid-30s for the central and western parts of the Aleutians. Once again, the warmest part of our state today, 37 degrees in Etka. Pretty impressive stuff, and again, just an idea of about how cold it is. Around the central and eastern interior, overnight lows could easily drop to 35 to 45 below. South central, single-digit temps are likely, 26 in Kodiak. Low to mid-teens for southeast. Coastal sections, again, well below freezing, including places like Sitka. For the Aleutians, 20s and 30s tonight, 24 in St. Paul, 10 in St. Lawrence. And for the Arctic coast, anywhere from 5 to 15 below. High temperatures tomorrow, expecting very little change across the Arctic coast. The interior, 5 to 15 below. Places like Fort Yukon, though, even colder at 21 below. South Central holding in the teens. Kodiak Island maybe nudging up above the freezing point briefly. And high temperatures tomorrow in southeast, teens, 20s. Ketchikan and Craig maybe breaking above the freezing point tomorrow, 12 degrees in Nome. Flying weather now, IFR conditions expected across the Brooks Range. MVFR stretching down across the Yukon. As you get out toward the west, you'll notice pockets of IFR there stretching across the western parts of the Aleutians and over the Pribilofs. For southeast, expect MVFR conditions stretching up through the Dixon entrance and approaching Sitka, but mostly staying offshore throughout the afternoon. Pass conditions now. Anaktuvik Pass expected to be IFR to start the day, but some improvement is noted there. And for Adigan Pass throughout the day, holding over to MVFR conditions. You'll expect that Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, as well as most areas around the Alaska Range, should maintain VFR throughout the day. That includes Rainy Pass and also areas a little bit farther north, like Windy Pass, expected to be visual throughout the day. And as we go around toward, let's see what the magic button will do today. There we go, Isabel Pass. VFR conditions are expected there, probably holding on to VFR at least through Tuesday afternoon, and probably into Wednesday we'll start to see some changes. Same goes for Mentasta Pass. VFR conditions there, and for Tanita Pass, visual flight rules should be maintained at least through Tuesday, maybe into Wednesday. Portage Pass may start to see some changes though as we get into Wednesday afternoon, with low pressure creeping a little bit closer to the Kenai Peninsula. What about the Chilkoot and White Pass? For right now, things look to be pretty clear there, but remember, the farther south you go, conditions are going to change pretty quickly, and turbulence may always be an issue through the week. Freezing levels right now, the surface freezing line obviously has dropped well south across most of the state. That warm and wet air is still building northward slowly, but again, that concentration is still hovering across southern parts of the Panhandle, and we've got a ridge that's building in that warm and wet air across the central and western parts of the chain. Everywhere else is pretty much dry and cold, as you've seen. The icing potential below 10,000 feet, we're going to keep it right there across the southern parts of southeast and the Dixon entrance. It's well south of Kodiak Island and the Shumagon Islands, but very little threat right now, light to isolated moderate. We did have a number of reports of turbulence across southeast today, so if you're flying in there, we do know about that. Northerly winds coming strong through the Bering Strait and across the Bering itself, with low pressure and a large trough all the way from the northern Gulf into the North Pacific. And then we've got a trough of high pressure building across the west. This is guiding the most active weather away from Alaska and allowing that deep cold to move southward even more across the west coast and into south central Alaska. At 9,000 feet, northerlies continue from 20 to as strong as 65 knots there from the central Aleutians into the interior. Wind speeds really slow down though across the Copper River Basin at 9,000 feet and rounding into a trough of low pressure there across the eastern Gulf. And then at 3,000 feet, you can see the pattern's a little different. Low pressure still sitting across the Gulf, guiding winds in a counterclockwise fashion from about 15 to 30 knots. They pick up greatly again across the central and eastern parts of the chain. Now northerly winds coming across the west coast at 25 to 45 knots. And we have westerlies coming across the Arctic coast at 25 knots. Very light winds across the Brooks Range, also generally from west to east. So let's take a look at turbulence. And as you would expect, things will continue to be a little bumpy across southeast, at least below 6,000 feet across Haida Gwaii, and light to isolated moderate across southern parts of southeast. As you get into the western parts of the Alaska Range and into the Kuskokwim River Valley, probably below 4,000 feet. You may run into some chop there with the winds wrapping around, low pressure and descending. And anywhere in the Bering Strait and Chukchi Sea southward into the central and eastern Aleutians, generally below 3,000 to 4,000 feet, you're probably going to run into some light to isolated moderate. As far as turbulence goes in the interior, things look pretty good. We've had some gusts around the Copper River Basin today. That should be subsiding somewhat, but I would be concerned about some isolated areas of turbulence there, mainly across the inner channels tomorrow, as the pattern probably isn't a whole lot different than what you've seen today. So if you're flying in southeast tomorrow, that's probably the greatest threat for things not on the map and things that you should be aware of on kind of a local level. And then again across southwest, probably a little bit greater area of threat there. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. This evening we've got Mark Madden back. Mark was on last time. Mark's a professor of aviation at the University of Alaska Anchorage. He's an ATP, CFI, II, MEI, and he's also been designated a Master CFI. Welcome back.
Thank you.
What's a Master CFI and what does it take to earn that?
Well, there are two organizations that do the accreditation for the Master CFI designation. Both organizations are approved by the FAA to give that designation. One is the National Association of Flight Instructors and the other one is Master Flight Instructors, LLC. I've been certified by both. The program is an industry review and accreditation of those flight instructors who have gone above and beyond what is typically expected of flight instructors. There's a rather significant amount of criteria that needs to be met to include such things as contributions to the aviation community, participation in different types of aviation programs, creation of media such as perhaps articles for magazines, books, training materials, PowerPoint presentations for class presentations, even video productions. Also the aspect of ongoing education, in other words professional development. And you're reviewed based upon basically those criteria, and you're reviewed by a national panel who have been recognized as being good representatives of the industry, and they understand what's the criteria for that certification.
How many years have you been instructing?
Oh boy, I'd say probably about 25 years.
So 25 years, I bet you've had some students who, shall we say, well, maybe scary or at least challenging things. Any stories to tell?
Well, fortunately, I have a short memory when it comes to those types of events, but I had one here recently. Coming back from the practice area, coming back into Lake Hood, we were complying with the Lake Hood segment for the airspace, and as we're coming across southbound, coming across Kinnick Arm, we've gotten halfway across the channel, and I advise the student, okay, go ahead and start reducing your power so we can start our descent. And at the same time, I go ahead and look to our right, out to the west, to make sure there isn't any conflicting traffic, even though we're in touch with the approach controller. And I hear the engine starting to come down in RPM. And I look back, and to my surprise, I guess you could say, the student was in fact reducing the engine RPM, but had mistakenly used the mixture control instead of the throttle. So quickly I said, no, not that one. Push that one back in, please. And the engine, of course, picked right up again. And then we got back to what we were supposed to be doing. But that's a learning experience.
Well, we were all student pilots once, and any words of wisdom for student pilots out there as they go through training?
Actually, I've got 3 words of wisdom for them. Study, study, study. Yes, it's true we can physically control the airplane by the use of our hands and feet on the rudders and ailerons and so on. But it's the knowledge that we have that helps us to make proper judgments at the right time. That's got to be the #1 priority.
So preparation.
Preparation. By studying, by understanding the environment, by learning as much as they possibly can, they will be that much safer as pilots, which is what we're after.
We've got a couple minutes left. Let me ask you a question I ask all of my guests. What one thing would make aviation safer in Alaska?
A couple of things come to mind, but if we want to narrow it down to just one, it would be for everyone to adopt the mind's stronghold and philosophy that there isn't any destination anywhere that is worth taking unnecessary risk. We don't have to go. We don't have to be there right now. And it's that go, no-go decision that is the thing that we really need to concentrate on. We shouldn't allow ourselves to get into positions that don't allow us to get out of them. There are some risk management tools that are available. The AOPA Air Safety Foundation, if you go online, you'll see that they have a general aviation risk management tool. It's fairly simple and it's easy to use. Very recently, that organization also came out with a new risk management app for your smartphone. It does pretty much the same thing. And it helps to quantify. One of the other aspects of that philosophy is don't ever allow pressure, whether it's expressed or implied, to make you do something that you know is not right.
Great. Mark, thank you for those words of wisdom. Risk management is something we have stressed, and I'm glad to hear you say it. Interesting about the app. I'll have to try that. Mm-hmm. Thanks for being on the program today.
You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. I'm going to remind you one more time to please become a member. If you're not, if you are a member, make sure you're renewed for 2014. You can go to our website and do that. And also, Click and Give is out there. We need donations to keep providing you the programs that we provide you. And until next time, fly safe.
Thanks a lot, Harry. Here's a look at today's sea ice edge, and you can always find this information at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. You'll get the tools that you need to put this on a plotting map of your choosing there. Across northern parts of Cook Inlet, still have some small ice conditions there. North of Kenai, mainly up toward the port of Anchorage, and also a lot of shore-fast and beach ice all the way around southwestern Alaska and into Norton Sound. You can see the concentrations increasing there. It's out toward St. Matthew, south now of Nunivak Island, not quite yet to the Pribilofs, of course. And of course, you can get this latest forecast and outlook anytime by going to the web address on your screen. Here's a look at southeast marine forecast. We're still going to be looking at some strong winds and gusts as you would expect after seeing those surface charts there. We'll have another quick peek at those before the end of the show. A northerly flow out of the Lynn Canal at 40 knots there, 9-foot seas and freezing spray likely. Northeasterly winds and higher gusts coming through the central interchannels, and across the south, northeasterlies anywhere from 30 knots on the inside and outside, with seas coming up to 12 feet there. Remember, the frontal boundary is kind of hanging out right about in here, and with moisture and low pressure working over this region, those winds are going to stay a little bit on the stronger side. 25 knots there going offshore as we go through Tuesday. As we get into Wednesday, south and westerly flow coming back onshore. Winds will be changing direction here across the central and southern parts of southeast. Northerlies diminish 25 knots with a 7-foot sea, and southeasterlies working up the coastline 20 knots, around 9-foot seas there, closing in on Yakutat and outside of Sitka. Across south central now, variable flow across the northern Cook Inlet, and in ice-free waters, seas will run around 2 feet. Those seas grow as you head out toward the Barren Islands. 20-knot winds coming in from the north and west. 4 to 6-foot seas are expected there, and heavy freezing spray possible in the Cook Inlet region, Barren Islands, and Shelikof Strait. Northeasterlies running down the coast out of Prince William Sound at 15 knots with 9-foot seas there east of the Barren Islands and out of Resurrection Bay. Northeasterlies also on the eastern side of Kodiak Island. 20 knots with a 10-foot sea, and freezing spray will be a threat there. Higher gusts possible around the Copper River Basin. That threat begins to shift a little bit as we get into Wednesday, with easterlies coming into the western parts of the Gulf. 25 to 30 knots with 5 to 8-foot seas there. Northwesterlies still crossing Kodiak Island, 20 to 25 knots. 5-foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, and freezing spray still an issue with north and northwesterly winds running down Cook Inlet at 10 to 35 knots. Across the Alaska Peninsula, a northerly flow continues with heavy freezing spray still a threat there in the Bering. 25 to 30 knots on the north side and 30 knots on the south side from the north and northeast. 12 to 13-foot seas there, and northwesterlies continue as we get into Wednesday. A freezing spray threat, it will continue as we go through the midweek with the temperatures and the wind as it is. Northerly flow for most of the Aleutians on Tuesday, anywhere from 25 to 30 knots there, with 14 to 16-foot seas, the highest of which will be between Adak and Atka and Nikolsky. Northerlies on the the Bering Sea side, 30 to 35 knots with a 15-knot wind, 15-foot sea south of Nikolsky. And southerlies already rebuilding there across the western Aleutians at 20 knots, shifting to more of a west and southwesterly flow on Wednesday. Northwesterlies east of Adak to Unalaska, 20 to 25 knots with 7 to 9-foot seas there and 8 to 9-foot seas on the Pacific side. Across the west coast, northerlies anywhere from St. Lawrence Island through St. Matthew, Nunivak Island, Kuskokwim Bay, about 25 knots or so. That's pretty uniform. 5 to 7-foot seas across St. Matthew and Nunivak Island, and 7 to 9-foot seas from Kuskokwim Bay all the way out toward the Pribilofs with freezing spray, of course, south of the ice edge. On Wednesday, a little bit of a shift there around St. Matthew Island, northeasterlies at 25 knots with a 7-foot sea, and the Pribilofs looking at winds diminishing to 15 knots. But all in all, things will remain cold, and the winds stay up for most areas closer to the coast. Across the Arctic coast, a north and westerly flow coming onshore to the Chukchi Sea, 15 to 20 knots, and northwesterlies east of Barrow, around 25 knots or so. Looks like a little bit more of a westerly flow around Kaktovik. The winds there in the Chukchi Sea diminish east of Barrow as we get into Wednesday. Northerlies continue from Point Ley to Point Hope to Kivalina, Kotzebue Sound, and southward around 20 to 25 knots. Recapping tonight's weather, a pretty decent pressure gradient there across southeast will keep the winds up tonight and again tomorrow, as you just saw. We have winter weather advisories for some of the southern inner channels, a winter storm watch for the surrounding areas for Craig, Klawock, Petersburg, and even Hyder. Some of the highest amounts in that watch area could include 10 inches of snow. That would begin tomorrow afternoon and into Wednesday there. So watch for developing weather headlines there in southern parts of southeast. Wind chill advisories for the Klondike and Taya Highway, Taya Inlet areas there. Wind chill values could drop to 30 to 35 below over the next day or so. And strong wind headlines there for areas around Juneau. High wind warning continues for gusts that could be up to 60 to 70 knots through about 9 o'clock tonight. Elsewhere, the cold front dropping southward will bring even colder and drier weather to the west coast and continued chance of snow showers in many coastal areas in the west and the Arctic coast, with south central remains dry and relatively clear into the midweek. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.